Hello and welcome to the Daily Agenda. It must be yet another day of disappointment for the deluded centre-right. But then again, given the extent of their delusion, perhaps disappointment never enters into their mindset. What is this particular disappointment about, one might ask, considering the fact that there are just so many disappointments when it comes to the centre-right, because they are just a disappointment factory, full stop, aren't they? Or are they just a factory churning out wishful thinking and delusion? Well, that's a moot point. But what we don't have to moot about at all, well, in fact, we do have to moot it because we're doing a podcast about it, aren't we? So, yes, the moot point, as it were, is their claim that Donald Trump was coming to save the UK. So he came over for a couple of days and he had a little trite press conference with Sir Keir Starmer, the Trotskyite globalist puppet, and kind of subtly put him on the spot about free speech. And Starmer stuttered and spluttered and lied his way through the session. We've always had free speech here. It died long ago, I assure you. Died long ago. We all know that for a fact anyway. And we guard it jealously. But to be jealous, somebody has to have a better system. Oh yes, of course. The Americans have a better system, don't they? It's called the First Amendment, written by English lawyers, no less. Okay? But we don't have a First Amendment, but we do need a new Bill of Rights in which Article 1 enshrines the right to freedom of expression and has supremacy over all preceding legislation, and which binds all future parliaments, and no parliament wants to be bound for obvious reason, because they don't want us to have freedom of expression. They just want us to have this, I could put it for want of a better description, a thought crime tyranny, in which the litany of judges in the courts who say, oh, well, freedom of speech is the cornerstone of English law, but you have abused your right to free speech. And how do we do that? By exercising that right, obviously, of course. But the real issue of today's podcast is the fact that the centre-right actually believed, seriously, last week, before the UTK fancy on the 13th, that two great things were going to happen in 1 week. There's going to be this huge demonstration for free speech. It was about grifting and foreign cultures primarily. And even Trevor Phillips, the former race relations czar, said that he was really quite impressed because there were all these brown and black faces at the UTK march because they've invented this new concept of British identity. Well, they haven't really invented it, have they? They just borrowed it from cultural Marxism, because the centre-right ideologically, because they are ideologically fluid, really is the centre-left. And wee little Irish leprechaun Tommy Robinson, coming from a Fenian background, rebellion is in his blood, according to him. Yes, but it's not British English rebellion, is it? It's Irish Fenian rebellion against Britain and the British. Okay? So let's be perfectly clear about that one. And he also travels on an Irish passport. Why is that if he's an English nationalist? And to somebody actually to describe him as a white nationalist is just absolutely staggering. Staggering. He's got to be the biggest straw man ever built in British political history. If he's a white nationalist, he's white in skin only. But inside, he's one of the roadmen, man, innit, bruv? Fam. Whatever. But anyway, Trump was billed up to be the second saviour in a week. And he came over here and saved absolutely nothing. He had a nice dinner with the Saxe-Coburgs and then had an interesting little conversation at a press conference with Der Stürmer, the East German Trotskyite, Pabloists, they call themselves here in Britain, don't they? Pabloists, yes, of course. Yes, the East German Trotskyite, who loves free speech so much that over 12,000 people a year have been arrested. And they're old figures. They're 2023 figures before Starmer and his criminal gang actually came to power. But that was the Tories, wasn't it? And over 300,000 people have been told to check their thinking by the institutionally corrupt police. Let's call them police in inverted commas. Can't call them police in any other context, can you? Because they are just thought police, policing thought. Non-crime thought incidents. That's all they are, non-crime thought incidents. And how did Donald Trump save Britain? The UK, as they call it? Well, he didn't, did he? He did absolutely nothing of the sort. But the fact that the centre-right actually believed that Donald Trump, yet another puppet of the Chosenites, we're talking about IPAC, you know what I'm talking about, IPAC Zog, some people call it, came over here, and they believed that he was being sent here to save freedom of expression and liberate the British. Well, it's absolutely astonishing. Really, it is. But it shows the extent to which the centre-right are just totally and utterly lost in this bubble of delusion, which just never seems to burst. Why doesn't it seem to burst? I'll tell you why, because they just cannot cope with reality. And the reality of the situation is this. And if people don't like it, well, that's just too bad. The UTK march with the Fenian rebel, Tommy Robinson, achieved absolutely bugger all than feeding the immigrant economy. Coke dealers made a mountain of, well, more money to bring in. Another white mountain of coke. Yeah. And of course, the rail companies and other transport companies made a mint out of it. But the British actually got nothing out of it, and it did absolutely nothing at all, nothing, to reinstate freedom of expression. And the reason why? Because it is just a rally. It's a showboating, narcissistic validation rally, for want of a better description, in which the deluded centre-right turn up, wave some flags, listen to some songs, listen to Maori dancers and gospel singers singing Jerusalem, yet more Jewish influence. I was about to say infiltration then. Is it infiltration or influence? Anyway, yeah, that's Christianity, isn't it? Jewish infiltration, influence. Is it not? No, according to them, that's not either. The extent of the delusion. It is just an absolute giant miasma of delusion. That's what the centre-right is all about. And that delusion feeds this belief that Donald Trump, the Donald, was coming here to set Britain free. Well, why would Donald Trump come here and set the British free? What's in it for him? What's he going to gain out of it? Absolutely nothing. All Donald Trump is concerned about is American citizens, in truth, and how these British instruments of tyranny overlap to affect British American citizens and American tech corporations, quite frankly. And that's their only concern. There's nothing else. And anyone who thinks that there is something else, i.e., a deep, secret love for the British, all part of this mythical, imaginary, special relationship. And that's another thing. The special relationship has always been one way. It's never really existed. Britain threw away its empire to Roosevelt for some crappy old destroyers to fight a war which we should never have been involved in the first place, which wrecked the whole of Europe when the real enemy was Marxism, Bolshevism, the Soviet Union. That was the real enemy. The mass-murdering Soviet Union, the Red Terror. Okay? But shock, horror, I can just imagine now, I can just see all these centre-right people. They're still celebrating the Battle of Britain, aren't they? Another delusion, quite frankly, in which Britain fought for its survival in a war it should never have been involved in, and then handed over all of its power to Yankee Doodle Dandy, lost of all of its power to Yankee Doodle Dandy, and then became a puppet state of Yankee Doodle Dandy. And the Americans do nothing other than occupy Europe. They are an occupying army of Europe. And that includes Eastern Europe. It used to be the Red Army. That was replaced by NATO, led by Yankee Doodle Dandy. If you're offended by Yankee Doodle Dandy, well then perhaps you should go back into your recent history and have that song struck from the record. I actually like it quite a lot. And I've got quite a few favourite Yankee Doodle Dandies, that's what I call them. Friends, that is, But the US administration is no friend of Britain, never has been and never will be. The US administration is completely toxic whilst it's under the dominion of IPAC. It has. The American people have no independent foreign policy outside of IPAC. It really is that simple. Don't like it? Yeah, again, that's another example of the delusion. That's rampant within the centre-right. So to actually believe that Donald Trump, who is only concerned about American tech companies and American citizens who may well be harmed by these British instruments of tyranny designed to eradicate freedom of expression, that's all he's interested in. He's not here to give the British people a notice that, oh, well, look, on the 21st of October, we're going to invade and overthrow the Starmer regime for you, and we're going to set you free, and we're going to do this out of the benevolence, the charity of our heart, because we love you so much. Get back into the real world, for goodness sake. What is wrong with these centre-right people? Well, we know what's wrong with them. They live in a manufactured hysteria, mass formation hypnosis, or is it mass formation psychosis? That's a moot point. The jury's out on that one. Crikey, don't speak of juries, my goodness. It's bound to end in conviction, isn't it, when the judge directs them to ignore all of the defence's evidence and all of the defence's witnesses. Sorry, I do apologise. The defence wasn't allowed to have any witnesses on the grounds of bad character. And when challenged over that bad character, the judge said no comment. They know who I'm referring to. They know who I'm referring to. And likewise, the judge said, the defence offers no defence because that same bent judge had struck out all of the defence's evidence. Took out the defence's evidence bundle completely and refused to allow the defendant to cross-examine any of the Crown's witnesses. This is what's called a trial here in evil little Britain, Devil's Island. And if any of these people, if anyone out there thinks Donald Trump came here to set the British free of Devil's Island, then quite frankly, they're living in a dream world. But we'd heard this before, didn't we? We heard this before. Paul Thorpe was the centrifugal cheerleader at that time, before he discovered he was made of pipe grease and bottled it. And just before Trump was elected, he said, Trump is going to save the world. How did he do that? How did he do that? Is blaming Putin for letting him down? Yeah, another massive distraction. In other words, Putin's not a little puppet who'll take orders from Trump to make Trump look good. In essence, that's the way it is. And his record on deportations, President Obama actually deported significantly more people than what President Trump has done thus far. Talk about massive disappointment. The centre-right is just a massive disappointment, full stop. But while ever people are following this centre-right safety valve operation, there will be one contrived disappointment after the other, after the other, after the other. And the only way to interrupt it and injunct that contrived disappointment is to get out of the centre-right and to join forces with nationalists who are not controlled by IPAC. Okay, we're not controlled by IPAC, to effect real socio-political change. And that means repealing a raft of tyrannical legislation, which has destroyed free speech. Donald Trump's not going to do it for you. Never in a million years. Get a grip on reality. Okay? Only we can do it. Only we can do it. It's left to us. And remember that no two people should be treated differently before the law. That everyone really should have equal rights before the law. But they don't. And, in terms of killing this entire concept of a two-tier justice system, we don't need the consent of this corrupt regime and Keir Starmer. We just need to continue with greater determination to replace this regime, to carry out regime change and repeal all of this legislation. And anyone who thinks that Nigel Farage is going to do it is living in the same cloud cuckoo land as the fools who believed Donald Trump was coming here to save Britain and reinstate free speech. How could anyone ever have entertained such a fantasy? I'm here to contradict all forms of fantasy, quite frankly, and that's why a lot of people don't like me. And you know what? I don't care. It actually gives me a kick, crushing their shibboleths, shattering them, casting them out, because that's where they need to be. They need to be cast out and replaced by real world thinking. And the only way we're going to achieve the reinstatement of freedom of expression is to do this politically, to have our hands on the levers of power through the parliamentary process and to actually scrub them from the record. And Donald Trump's not going to do it, and J.D. Vance is not going to do it, and nor is Rubio, and of course Charlie Kirk can't do anything now because he was assassinated in a very dubious criminal conspiracy. And anyone who swallows the official line on it, well, obviously, they're probably the same type of people who thought Donald Trump was coming here to save UK. He's not going to save the UK. Only the British can save Britain, if they want to. And there's only one way to do that, and that's with nationalism, not with the centre-right, because the centre-right, quite frankly, is just cloud cuckoo thinking. There is a silver lining if you come out of the cloud cuckoo land and come back down to terra firma and look up at the sky, as it were, for what it truly is. There is a silver lining. It's called nationalism. But it's entirely up to you if you want to pursue that path. Thank you for tuning into the Daily Agenda, and thank you for watching the Anti-Fantasy channel.